Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today I am joined by my friends and colleagues Alexandra Blair and Whitney Kranz to discuss the astrology for the month of September. You guys have met Alexandra and Whitney over the past couple months. I'm really glad that they're back and like my regular wing women, and so stoked to have them here and to break down another month of astrology. We are also going to be reading a few of your stories. We asked all of you to send in some stories about your experiences with the astrology last month, and we gathered a few of those. Would also like to encourage you guys to do that again this month. If you have a story to share, I'll tell you how to do that in a minute here. But before we get into any of this, I want to remind you all to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. It really does help the channel to grow. We've doubled our subscriber average over the course of the past month or so as we've been pushing to try to get our channel to the 70,000 subscriber mark. So thank you all for taking the time to subscribe. If you regularly watch the channel and haven't yet subscribed, we super appreciate it. You can find transcripts, by the way, of any of these daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. When you are over there, there are a couple of things to check out that I want to promote quickly before we get into it today. I'll take you over to the website right now so you can see it on the screen. When you go to the events page, live talks, you can see that on September 19th, I am doing a talk on Venus's 12 love languages. Subtitle is Falling in Love Through the Zodiac. And what I'm going to be doing is telling you the kinds of archetypal stories that Venus tells about our love lives by virtue of the sign that she is in at the time of our birth. I really think you'll enjoy this. It's a real deep dive into your Venus placement that I think a lot of people will get something good from. In October, I'm doing a talk on the myth of astrological compatibility. Some of the big problems that I see with very kind of common basic ways of approaching astrological compatibility. I'm going to give you what I think actually works. So I hope you guys will enjoy that talk as well. When you register, you will get the live link for the webinar, but you'll also get the recording afterward if you can't make it live. Go to the courses page and you're going to see the Astrology for Beginners course is brand new. The sale on that has ended, but you can still pick that up. And it might be a good place to start before joining our first year course, which starts in November, and registration will be opening on September 9th. So I will be promoting that first year program more soon. The sale for that program will begin here in another week. So stay tuned for more on that. And on that note, I am really excited to bring back my co-hosts, Alexandra and Whitney. Hey.
Hello. Thanks for having us back.
Yes.
The wing women are here.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm so August was a huge month. We were just before we started recording, we were all off camera or whatever, or off platform talking about the craziness of August. July had a lot of astrology. August had a lot of astrology. We're rolling into eclipse season now, so the fun is not gonna stop. But it was a big month. It was a big month for everybody. And before we get started today, a couple of headlines. We have some stories that you all sent in from last month. I'm going to pick a few stories that I thought were fun and also tell you how to share stories for September's astrology as the month goes on. And then we might read some of your stories, in October when we start October's overview. So that should be fun. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear how you guys are doing. How was August?
You go first, Alexandra.
Okay, yeah. August was an awesome, wild ride. I felt like I could barely catch a breath. And that's mainly because Mars and Jupiter were conjoining atop my natal sun and Mercury in Gemini. And so that was just, I walked a lot. If you're following me on Instagram, I was walking like 20,000 steps a day. And I had so many fun, creative moments. I was in New York. I'm home now. It was just a cool, wild ride. And I was telling you guys a little bit before, but, we sit here and say, oh, boundaries are going to come up or there may be some restrictions. And then I'm always somehow shocked when it's happening to me. Whoa, this applies to me too. Crazy. It's just my own chart is a mystery to me. So it was fun to see the astrology be revealed to me and witness my own boundaries where there were things that I wanted to do. And the day would end. And I was like, that was how many hours were in the day. And those things have not been done. And so now I will go to bed.
Right.
Yeah. How was it for you, Whitney?
Oh man, I moved in August. Hi, new space, if you can recognize it.
Looks great.
Thank you. I know my wait, over here it's mirrored. My rainbow bookshelf. Very proud of that styling.
Beautiful.
That's cool.
No, that's the Venus in Virgo, right? Make it beautiful and organized.
For sure.
So, you know what? You probably remember me telling you how scared I was that I picked the 16th to move, which was the Mars Saturn transit. And it ended up being just so helpful. We were able to work so hard and just get shit done, right? And so that thankfully we avoided any sort of volatility that was in the air and channeled it into probably the quickest move that we have ever done, which was amazing. You know, and there were some Venus aspects around the full moon, and Venus was actually in Virgo conjunct my natal moon, and it all ended up feeling just very positive, like, oh, we're realizing newness and beauty and security, which is kind of what we had felt like we lost from the Venus Pluto dynamic in July, if you remember that story. So yeah, it was awesome. I'm just glad to be on the other side of the move, and now we'll see what's in store for September, right? With all of this action in the sky.
I had an experience. I want to share the story really quick, and then I want to share some of everybody else's stories. So around Venus's opposition with Saturn, which came in around that full moon, like traffic jam. My oldest daughter, who recently decided that she wants her own bedroom, right? So she was sleeping with her sister, and she's like, I want my own bedroom. And it was a big heartbreaking mess for my younger daughter. And like, so it was like, we finally got them into their own rooms. And then, of course, the younger one has no problem sleeping. She's out like a log, no sleep regression. She's golden. The older one who wanted her own room is freaking out. It's so funny. It was like, and it was all peaking, like her amount of fear and anxiety. I was like, oh my God, do we have to like medicate her? Like, it was bad. I was like, and of course I'm like, not gonna do, but I was like, yeah, we were like, all the herbs were out.
I know Ashley was cooking something up.
Oh my God, it was a mess. And then this crazy thing happened as those two things were peaking, right? And we were trying like every trick in the book, you know, bribery. If you sleep through the night so many nights in a row, nothing was working. And finally, I said, we had this like amazing father-daughter talk one night. And it was really cool because, I mean, to be completely frank, my girls usually really deeply open up to Ashley, and they'll open up to me too, but more so they go to mom for that right now. And I'm sure that maybe shifts as they get older. Who knows? But yeah. So this was kind of cool because it was kind of a moment for me, right? As a dad, I was like, okay, wow, she's really opening up to me. And so for the first time in her life, I shared with her a very very abstract version of my ayahuasca experiences and about facing fear. And I just told her I participated in some ceremonies in the jungle, and they were kind of scary. And, you know, and one of the things that I liked about them was that I had to go through things that were scary, and I had to figure out what tools I had inside of me to like get through it. Right. And so, and I didn't know if any of this would land with her or not, because you got to keep it short. Their attention spans aren't super long, you know. Anyway, so the next day she comes up to me and she shows me a book that she has. And like a long time ago, it was kind of like the Inside Out stuff. She was curious about emotions. We got her a book and it's something about anxiety in it, right? Well, on the back of this book, there were other books the author had written. And she came and she said, look, this author wrote a book that said what to do if you have trouble sleeping at night for kids. Can I get that book? And I said, sure. So I ordered her the book from Amazon, you know, whatever, next day delivery, it comes. And it's just this little book. And she sits down and she's like pouring through it. She's a Virgo rising with Jupiter in Virgo too. So she's just pouring over the book, you know, like she's into it. And she comes up to me and she goes, Dad, I figured it out. And I was like, okay. And in the book, there's a game. She read the whole book cover to cover. And then in the book, there was this game, and it's like you put 3 tickets on the door, 3 little tickets, and you can use those 3 tickets to call to mommy and daddy, and they can come to the door. You have to stay in bed. You can't get up. They can't hug you or touch you, but you can call out to them, and they can come, and they can just offer a little soothing, like, it's okay, you'll be okay. Good night. We're going to bed now, whatever. But you can call 3 times. And if you however many tickets in the morning that you keep, right, you start adding those up. And then when you get to like 15 or something, you get to decide a fun thing to do with one of your parents. So she was like, I want to do this. This is going to work. I want to do it. She became just like bound and determined to get her tickets. And she did it. She got the tickets. She started working on it. And then she cashed them in. And we had a daddy-daughter movie night where we just like ate popcorn and watched a movie together. And I was so proud of her. I was like,
that's so cute.
Put this together. You figured it out. Of course, Venus is in my 5th house of children, opposing Saturn. And so I thought that was really kind of a neat story. And for her, that was Venus, Saturn across her 1st and 7th.
Yeah.
So I thought that was
so sweet.
Kind of a neat
That's
manifestation.
Really adorable.
Yeah. We had some friends over, and I was like, she's so resourceful, she like dug into her. And then, she was saying, we were sitting there and she goes, well, you told me that you one time went to the jungle and had to find tools. And I was like, oh my God, she actually listened.
She was recording.
Yeah. I was like, that's so cool. I don't get those moments all the time. So that was neat.
Amazing.
Well, yeah. How about this? This is the full moon in Aquarius story from one of you that you shared. I like this one. I thought it was kind of funny. Full moon in Aquarius in August. As a 30-something-year-old married mother of 2, I decided to take half an edible for the first time one night after the kids went to bed. Let's just say I zooted off to space.
Bye.
Having too many to count realizations of repeat patterns within myself, how to fix it all. Blowing my mind, all while leveling my head as I lay melting into the blankets with the worst cotton mouth and unable to fully open my eyes. But in all seriousness, it has made me realize I've been in a dark place for a while, and I am a little afraid of having a beautiful life.
So profound. Oh my gosh. The seeing the patterns, a bigger picture. Could it be any more Aquarian, right? And wasn't the full moon was square Uranus, right? So these unexpected insights. Oh
yeah. This was a Venus opposite Saturn story. I'll share this one too, maybe one more after this, and then we'll get going. Saturn in the 8th house opposite Venus in the 2nd in this woman's chart. An internal dialogue of my sensual self, longing for sexual expression and connection, have been held back strictly by my Saturnian discrimination, expressing itself into long periods of celibacy. On a deeper layer in the Saturnian side, there's some fear, projection, judgment on the emotional cords created by opening up sexually to someone else, or even judgment of orgasming and being scared or paranoid to do so. I'm just kind of summarizing a little bit of a jumbled sentence. Finally, I feel strengthened. Venus has helped me to start loosening up, and I'm feeling called to express more of my sexual energy. Again, I'm summarizing a number of sort of paragraphs here. I'm allowing myself to experience sensuality without judgment, and I might even gently, carefully step into sensuality with another human being now. Thought that was pretty cool.
That's beautiful, and probably involves some of the 8th house karmic entanglements, to use your 8th house talk recently. And something I've been thinking about so much lately, I've just seen so many clients who have a Saturn that is hard until you're like at that age where they say Saturn matures. Like, I don't know that I have seen that work so well for all the other planets, but Saturn most certainly has a maturation age, and Saturnian things can become a lot more beautiful later in their existence.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll share one more. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Let's do it. My wife has Mercury retrograde in her natal chart in the 8th house. This was when it went into Leo. Today, that Mercury retrograde conjoined her natal Mercury retrograde in Leo. And she received notice that her credit card had been hacked and thousands of dollars spent. My God, that was, of course, that would have
Brutal.
been he's mentioning the degree, which would have been the square to Uranus too. So that Mercury square to Uranus that was hitting her natal Mercury retrograde in the 8th house comes back with the cyber security issue. Credit card company was on it. All monies will be returned to her, but the symbolism was so striking, I couldn't help but share it with you guys.
Oh my gosh.
No kidding. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
I know we have to get to the astrology of the month, but can I share a grabbed story about
Yes,
Mercury
please.
retrograde? Okay, because I think this actually really relates to what we just heard. So this happened to me. Mercury retrograde was conjunct Venus in Virgo. That was earlier in the month. And, Virgo, where Mercury is supercharged, is my second house. And Pisces, whose exalted ruler is Venus, rules my 8th house, right? So that was that second 8th house connection. On this day, I received a flurry of text messages and calls. I, of course, didn't answer the calls. I'm a millennial. And so the text messages all say something like, "Hi, Andrew, with an X number credit score, you could receive this as a mortgage. Hi, Andy, with however many tens of thousands of dollars in debt, I can get you this deal for a mortgage buyout," right? I'm like, oh no, is this credit card fraud? So uncharacteristically, by like the 6th phone call, I answer it. I'm like, what is going on here? Oh, are you not Andrew? I won't say the last name. No, but that's my ex-husband from over a decade ago.
Ooh.
So here is Mercury giving me this little gift of insight into how grateful I am that my assets are no longer entangled with this person with a subpar credit score and tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt.
Wow.
So I actually reached out to him. I texted him. I was like, what's going on here, sir? Like, can you remove my information from your application? He's like, I think this is phishing, Whitney. I had nothing to do with this. I don't know.
Oh my God.
It still hasn't been resolved. Literally today, I got one of these messages. I'm like, oh, but I changed all my passwords, did all of the things.
Yeah.
Wow.
So how about that for Mercury retrograde?
Well, yeah, Mercury turns, I mean, as we're recording this a little before it airs, but we're recording this and Mercury has not yet turned direct, so maybe it'll straighten out soon.
Maybe this recording won't exist when it's over. It's been really spicy, this one. They aren't always, but Mercury gets to be its little trickster self in Virgo, and I feel that. I went on an international road trip. Mercury in Virgo's in my 9th house. And so you can imagine all the mayhem.
Oh my God.
So yeah.
Totally. Well, let's go around the room here and ask, what is your transit of the month for September? What do you have marked as like the epicenter of September?
I mean, it's the eclipse, isn't it?
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, no. Okay, I will give you a real answer. Of course, I chose the happiest transit of them all, Venus,
the trine
Jupiter.
It was cute. I was like, that's a cute moment this month.
And I feel like it is informing our partial lunar eclipse, right? Because the eclipse happens in Pisces, and this is a transit between its rulers, Venus and Jupiter. And it just feels like really bold and buoyant and like some grand ideas happening.
Yeah. I like that one. That's a really good one. What do you have, Alexandra?
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about the sun opposite Saturn. And I'm thinking about that because we've at this point had 3 Saturn ruled full moons in a row. So the sun has been coming to the negotiating table of the opposition with Saturn's representative for 3 months in a row. And at this moment, the sun actually sits down at that negotiating table with Saturn themselves. And it's going to be relevant for the eclipse as well, because Saturn is in Pisces, impacting that eclipse.
Yep.
So this is going to be the 4th lunation in a row that has a heavy Saturn imprint, which is so weird because it's summer. And we had this Saturn epoch from 2017 to 2023 where Saturn, was in Capricorn and Aquarius. And now it's like it was quiet for a couple months, but don't worry, it's Saturn girl summer all over again. So I think the Sun Saturn opposition is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many different ones to choose. There's a lot of aspects this month. They're not all happening in like 3 days as they have in like
Right.
August and July. But I think that the Sun opposite Neptune coming right off from the eclipse is really interesting too, because it's almost as though the eclipse is like an initial trigger for that Sun Neptune opposition. So I feel like from the eclipse through the Sun Neptune, I'm really fascinated by that kind of Neptunian symbolism around the same time. We'll see what that looks like, but that's a kind of otherworldly signature that, I don't know, it's exciting. I feel like Jupiter Saturn it's kind of fading a little bit now. Jupiter Saturn to me was very nuts and bolts. Like I felt like I was getting like the manual to like a complicated piece of IKEA furniture, and like
and it's
take this apart, put it together. Like there was a lot of that. And I feel like this month there's a little bit more like almost like some weird otherworldly ashram that we might be going to like in the middle of the month. Something very imaginative about that signature that I thought was kind of neat. The other one, frankly, that I kept looking at was Venus square Pluto. I think that's kind of fascinating, given that Pluto's very last stand in Capricorn is happening. So this is the last time that we get Venus and Pluto contacting each other while Pluto's in Capricorn. So that's kind of neat.
And now Venus is dignified, and it's just, there's something special there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, why don't we go ahead and get into it and roll through these, and we'll tell you what we think about each of them in order, starting at the beginning of the month, as we always do. And I am going to put the real-time clock up now and get my little epic pen out. Here we go. Can you see, does it say September 1st, you guys?
It does, yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Let me get my epic pen.
What kind of personality are they going to give us today, that pen?
What do we have today? Let's start with this. September 2nd, we have a new moon in Virgo. We can see it coming through here. And at the exact same time, on the same day, we're seeing Mars go through a square to Neptune. It's an interesting combination, and I'd be curious to hear what comes to your minds when looking at one of them or both of them. What do you guys think?
Yeah, this new moon in Virgo feels like we're planting seeds here, right? We're planting seeds out of concern for the harvest. And I can't help but notice that this happens shortly after the moon opposes Saturn as well, right? And so I feel like, to me, this is asking us, like, how do we get it right? Like, as we're pushing forward with this momentum, how are we getting it right? That's my quickest hit with the moon in Virgo. New moon.
Yeah, I totally agree with that take. And I think the month kind of starts a lot more harmonious than it ends. This degree of Virgo, interestingly, I think the moon is exact at 11 degrees. In 2026, there will be a total lunar at 12 Virgo. And in 2027, there will be a Mars retrograde touching all the way back to 10 Virgo. So this is a degree that is going to be significant and important for the next 2.5, 3 years of development. If you have points, at around 11, this might be relevant or interesting, but it looks like this new moon is relevant in a story arc that kind of persists through some eclipses and some retrogrades that are going to be happening over the next couple of years.
Really
That's a fascinating
interesting.
way of, yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, especially if we also consider like the Mars Neptune signature
Yeah.
at the, because when I think of new moons, I think of like a seeding point, right? So as
Yes.
Alexander's saying, the seeding point has an arc that's coming with it over the next couple of years. And if you think about Mars squaring Neptune at the same time, that's fascinating because it would almost suggest that there is um, like a sense of mission or purpose that's, you know, some transcendental sense of vision or ideal, that the kind of crusading quality of Mars and Neptune that is part of the new moon in Virgo. I think the new moon in Virgo doesn't, you know, it's not like you think of Virgo and you think crusader, you know, it's like a little bit more like Sagittarius, Pisces, those Jupiter ruled signs. The Mars Neptune square feels like crusader. But one thing that's interesting about Virgo is that I agree with what Whitney said, is that there's sometimes this feeling of like, I need to do the right thing, or there's a concern with what is good, what is pure, and what is helpful or useful. And so I wonder about the crusade being about helpfulness, service, usefulness, goodness, purity, things like that. And then Mars Neptune's tendency to want to save or redeem, right? So could
Sure.
this be whether there's some service motivation to save or redeem or help some, you know, someone, or some kind of collective feeling of needing to serve a cause or a purpose? Those are some of the themes that kind of blend together in my mind.
Well, and I think that's really interesting too, and maybe takes us into the next one, right? Where Mars is entering Cancer, because this almost, I know I'm mixing dignities here, but it almost feels like we're getting, just like a little preview of a watery Mars, right? With a
Mhm.
Mars square Neptune. And like Mars entering Cancer to me feels like mama bear
Mm,
energy.
mm,
You know
mhm.
what I mean? Like we're starting into this like protective mothering. It's also about making connections, right? And caring like unabashedly.
Mhm. Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, Mars does move into Cancer on September 4th. The reason that I feel like it's really important to highlight this one is that
Yeah.
Mars is going to spend like 6 of the next 8 months in Cancer with the
Sure.
retrograde that will come in December, where it'll take a little bit, but Mars will back from early Leo into Cancer, and then spend all the way until April in the sign of Cancer. So, you know, long period of Mars in Cancer where it's traditionally depressed, but also I think there's a lot of really interesting redeeming qualities that come from planets in their fall. So maybe we could talk a little bit about Mars in Cancer next. You guys want to share any insights that you have about that?
Yeah, I happen to have a mama bear with Mars in Cancer. She
Your
has
mom?
Mar Yes, she has Mars,
Okay.
Jupiter, and the Sun on her midheaven in Cancer.
Oh my
Tell
God.
us
And let me tell
more.
you, she's a mama bear. Not always for me. Sometimes the mama bear's against you. You know what I mean? It's like
Sure.
there's a real sense with the Mars in Cancer of sometimes that energy being misplaced or
Mhm.
misdirected. I think in a mundane application, not in a natal application always, but there is a real sense of like harm about Mars and Cancer. It's like you bagged up 50 pillows, but there's also a knife somewhere in the bag and you're kind of just going through it. That's like the sense that I really have about it. I think Mars and Cancer can be difficult in that way. Again, mundane. Natally, there's so much else to consider. So you couldn't quite just say that.
Yeah.
But it's just a little difficult uh bit of astrology right here, especially because it takes so long when it stations. This is similar in a way to the Mars retrograde that happened in Gemini, so you can kind of revisit those dates. It was like October 2022 through I think February 2023, and think about how that impacted the Gemini side of things. But this just has also an interesting kind of relationship to Venus over there until Venus goes into Mars's sign of Scorpio at the end of the month, which is actually just again one of the ways that the month ends more difficult than it begins. So that was
Yeah.
a little mixed bag of thoughts, but hopefully something came out.
Totally read you. And that's really, really interesting that your mom has this placement. And so you can speak so poignantly to it. One of the things that I could say about Mars entering Cancer is like kind of this bull in a china shop feeling, or and so like, or what happens when the warrior returns home, like there's a lot of energy and we're in a small space, and
Yeah.
are we bringing our battles home with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mars in Cancer is one of the great signifiers of civil war, of civil strife, of discord and misfortune with respect to things like, families and family karma, and unity in a family setting, or anything that feels like family being sort of threatened or disturbed. Sometimes those disturbances need to happen for the sake of growth, and so we shouldn't look at this as just like some whirlwind of bad stuff that's coming. But the other thing about Mars in Cancer is that I've noted this a few times in my life, where I've had several different bodybuilding coaches who have been champions at very high levels, and they all have Mars in Cancer. And when they were kids, they were scrawny, and they were called scrawny and picked on for being little. And then it is as though part of the Mars in Cancer archetype, at least for certain athletes because this is the same, I think it's Michael Phelps has it, but there's a story arc where it's kind of like, I am going to rise up from a feeling of being maybe weak or incapable or not so strong or something like that. And I'm going to demonstrate, tremendous success, or, I'm going to build my body or my physique or whatever. I'm going to become strong. So the other thing is about, we can think about like a mama bear protecting or advocating for people who are weak or who are vulnerable. But then there's also that sense of like self-advocacy. Like I'm going to rise up and deal with some way in which I feel like I need to individuate through a feeling of emotional immaturity, or, I lack something and I've got to cultivate it. Like that can be a really strong motivating force for Mars in Cancer as well.
For sure.
Yep, that's such a good point. I think like Muhammad Ali also has Mars in Taurus specifically. And I think about, I think Mars's signs of exaltation and detriment of fall are some of the more potent teaching tools that we have, because you can look at Mars in Taurus versus Mars in Cancer and see the difference between detriment and fall. I feel like the way that I explain this to clients that I work with is that Mars in Taurus is a little bit like a Navy SEAL being dropped into a ballet, and it's a little silly and it's out of context, but hey, like a Navy SEAL has body awareness. They have the strength to maybe do some of those ballet lifts. They can, take direction. They're going to make the best with what they have. I think Mars in Cancer is a little like a ballerina being dropped into Navy SEAL camp. There is a very real risk. And there's like very real harm that may come there. And it doesn't mean that success can't be had. And it doesn't mean that there's not some version of victory that might come from that. But there is a very real possibility of like harm and inability to kind of access tools and resilience to get the job done.
Yeah, I think like one thing that is really interesting about I just went in the wrong direction. Here we go. So one thing that's really fascinating to me is, what is election day this year? Is it November
4th, right?
Is it a Tuesday or is it a Monday?
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday, November 5.
Oh, yeah. One day off.
So like, look at this, like right before the election, Mars culminates at the last degree of Cancer and opposes Pluto. I think that's interesting, considering that, one of the candidates is a woman, right? So I just wonder, right before the election, what topics that are unique to women are peaking? And that could be a million different things, but one of the things that like comes up again and again around Mars through Cancer are like women's body, women's rights, women's choice, like the relationship between the mother and the child. Like all of those dynamics are often threatened in the courts, in the law, like the like wherever people listening to this may stand, just from an archetypal perspective, the issues around feminism, women's rights, women in power are often really pronounced with Mars in Cancer, for better or worse. Sometimes you'll see attacks on, like, I think there was a Mars in Cancer period where another just kind of mundane example was, I'm going to go back and find it. I think it was 2008. When was the housing crash?
That was
it was in 2008, and I have the dates actually. It was November 15, 2007, Mars retrograde through January 30th, 2008.
Yeah, so there it is, Mars retrograde in Cancer. That's what I was thinking of, was like the housing crash. Well, there's vulnerability there for families, right? For your domestic life. So that's what I'm getting at, is that's I think Alexander's exactly right, which is that we don't want to we don't want to blow smoke up anyone's ass. Like, Mars in Cancer can be really threatening it is very much more like dropping the ballerina into the war territory. That I love that, by the way, and I'm going to quote you and use that sometime in class. But like Mars in Cancer can bring that really that very real sense of threat to to those subjects. And the other thing, like, I'll never forget, I want to say it was 2000. Hold on, let me get there. I know where this is. Here it is. So yeah, it's like right here. So in this, you see how Mars is going through just a normal Mars and Cancer transit.
Yeah.
But this Mars opposite Pluto transit for my wife coincided because she's a Cancer rising across her 1st and 7th. Yeah. And this coincided with her parents getting divorced. So like just separation, right? Yeah. Of like, so you just see those kinds of things happening. Also things like, and I don't mean to scare anyone, but I have seen more mastectomies in the lives. Is that what it's called when maybe a breast?
Yeah, mastectomy.
So I've seen more of those under Mars in Cancer than I can count in terms of just like a repeatable surgery transit.
Sure.
And often they turn out very well too. But I'm just saying, like, Cancer rules the breast. Like you'll see that those are vulnerable places that we go to for nourishment. That so. Those are some of the things we have to be thinking about as Mars goes into Cancer. It's difficult, but also like that. My favorite part about Mars in Cancer personally is the feeling of I will fight for what I am emotionally invested in.
Yeah. Adam, these dates that you brought up, so that previous Mars retro in Cancer, November 15, 2007 to January 30, 2008, like that's also sort of related to the political stuff that's going on. I'm going to leave it at that, but yeah, that's relevant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that is really super fascinating.
I think that's relevant. It came back up to me because you're talking about fighting for what you believe in, and everyone wants to believe that about their politics.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, totally. Okay, Whitney, did you want to add anything before we keep going?
No, I'm just dumbfounded, and right after this call, I'm going to be like digging into all of these things and how they connect. I want to know, okay, wait, how does that work in my life too? Very, very interesting.
Plug them into your chart. Yep.
Exactly.
Everyone knows that astrologers can't read their own charts, so don't even.
I can try. I still try, but no, I
know. Yeah. Well, on the 6th, we have Mercury squaring Uranus for the final time, as it has done so a few times in direct and retrograde motion, and now again in direct motion. So this does feel like ideas that we've been working on that have maybe been coming through in bits and pieces and starts and stops are really going to come together around this time. I love that Mercury is retrograde, or Mercury is direct now, is the morning star, feels very inventive, forward thinking. I feel like this could be a real like light bulb moment going off. And I'm just going to pair it with this really quick and then hand it off to both of you. I like that it's coming a day before Sun opposite Saturn, because often necessity is the mother of invention, and the Sun is feeling constrained, and that force of Saturnian necessity is just popping. And then we see a Mercury-Uranus square, which I think is actually kind of a good omen. It's sort of like, yeah, there's going to be a feeling of constraint, and then there's going to be a moment of speaking liberation into existence, or of an idea that we could use somehow to work through something. On the other hand, sometimes great ideas come up and then you're immediately faced with what the no is. Well, I'm sorry, that's a great idea, but here's the impediment. But still, I like that this could provide us with some motivation, regardless of, you know, whether we're able to immediately enact something. It's like, well, maybe we just have to kind of move around an obstacle and then we can implement some new idea. But I just think that that sequence is really interesting on the 6th and 7th. What do both of you think about this one?
No, I totally agree. You said it's a light bulb moment, and to me it feels like, yes, it's another lightning strike of intellect, right? And we're getting a jolt of energy. And you know, it's just interesting to me too, obviously, with this cycle of these Mercury Uranus dynamics we've been having. You know, the last two had a lot to do with the former full moons. Wasn't this the wasn't this where Biden announced he was stepping down in July? Or am I confusing? I might be confusing
That was on
aspects.
the full moon on the 21st. But the thing about those lunations is like they had all the aspects in the lunation.
Yes,
So
everything was
it
all
was baked in. It was baked in.
I was
everything
just
all
going
at
to say
once.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's relevant still.
Well, and we're, because we have that Mercury went back and forth 3 times during all of that happening this summer. So I think you're on the right track there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
feel
wild. Tell me more, Alexandra.
Yeah, I think this for me was kind of one of the most interesting transits of the month, just because we've had the sun opposing a Saturn ruled moon twice in Capricorn. So we had June, July, and then in August, we had the sun opposing a Saturn ruled moon in Aquarius with the sun in its domicile. And it just feels like the sun and Saturn are at a negotiating table. That's kind of a thing that people bring up about the opposition as an aspect. And a friend of mine, Anna Reed, recently put it in my brain. So I was like, okay, I'll bring this up because it's so appropriate. It's like the sun is meeting with Saturn's representatives. And here in this moment, the sun is meeting directly with Saturn at this negotiating table. And part of what this brings up for me is that this Pisces Virgo axis feels so much about service. That's a word that you mentioned, Adam, and serving others, personal needs. It kind of feels similar to what's going on with the Pluto stuff as well and how it's moving in and out. It's so easy to look at this and to see Venus in Libra and the moon in Libra and to think like, oh, balance, balance, balance. And there's probably some of that. But I can't tell you how many people from that mutable stuff that was happening in August are coming to me and saying, when will I get an answer or an end to this ambiguity of this situation? And you said it so beautifully in your Venus in Virgo video, Adam. You said, find a oneness in duality. And that, I think, actually is the way out here. I don't think Saturn's asking us to necessarily erect a boundary or make a choice or whatever, especially when Mars is in Cancer. It's kind of like, can you sit with this discomfort? Can you find a way to be productive in ambiguity and accept it and expand to, you know, accommodate more than you already have going on? So I'm thinking a lot of that about strength that doesn't look like strength training, but that looks like mobility training or longevity. That's what's coming up for me.
Love it.
Love it.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add to this that's coming to my mind is something that my Jungian therapist said. Ever since I started like realizing at a certain point in my astrological consulting journey that I needed to talk to someone myself regularly, because it's just, you know, you're talking to so many other people, like, okay, I need to do this myself. So I started speaking with a Jungian back in 2017, and I've been working with the same guy ever since. And recently I was talking with him about feeling mired in ambiguity. So I love that you're bringing this up. And he was telling me about something that Jung taught that, you know, kind of might be a helpful way of thinking about how we work through periods of ambiguity. And he was saying, oftentimes ambiguity is waiting, like, because let's just describe. So like, I've got this situation where I have to make a choice and I've got my pros and cons equally weighed out. And so I'm like, it's very Jupiter and Gemini, right? It's like,
You've got your Virgo list as
yeah,
well.
I've got my Virgo list. I've got the pros and cons, and you know what? I can make a case either way, and I feel just like I feel mired in ambiguity, not knowing what to do, not necessarily caring what to do, feeling compelled by both sides of something. And he said, Jung said that we would sometimes be waiting for the I think he called it the transcendent function. It's like all of a sudden something completely unrelated to the problem, at least on any literal causal, obvious logical level, will occur. And it takes you into an understanding of what you think you're looking at that has nothing to do with the way you thought you were looking at it. It's like something totally unrelated, like a conversation with a friend or a dinner with your family members or something. And it'll be something completely unrelated. And you'll have a shift of consciousness in that situation that will suddenly bring you into a totally different way of viewing the thing you felt so ambiguous about, or that's felt so ambiguous. And then you'll have a different way of moving through it. And we're waiting for something that is like what might be described as irrational to actually help guide us through a situation. And that was what I was hearing you say a little bit of, or at least that was what was coming up for me.
Yeah.
I see that. I mean, absolutely, with the Mercury squaring Uranus at the same time too. Very, very good. Very good example. He should join the show. Is he an astrologer? No.
I know, right? I mean, I'm not kidding you. Like, there will be times where something that is happening, I don't know, let's just use an example of like my rescue dog, Hilda, who is like working with a lot of anxiety and stuff like that. And I swear to God, there'll be times where like I'm just like hanging out with her, working with her, learning how to be, the best dog owner for her. And like something in some other totally unrelated piece of my life will just like click into place. I love it when that happens, but I've had that happen multiple times where I've like had ideas for podcasts or archetypes, understanding of an archetype pop through while like hanging out with my dog, because that relationship is allowing me to experience an archetype that's at work in some other place, but it's giving me an objective medium. You know what I'm saying? So
right. And space for creativity.
Yeah.
I think this is very relevant with relation to the fact that there is going to be an eclipse across this axis just a few days after this transit.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think whatever needs to be revealed will surely be revealed.
When we get to the 12th, the sun will square Jupiter, both in sun and Jupiter in Mercury ruled signs. Well, Mercury is now not only the morning star, but exalted and in its own domicile.
Yes.
So that feels like perhaps some really nice, like the mercurial resources, whether that's on the level of mind or skills or data or information or communication, seem abundant in this moment and able to create maybe a really nice connection.
Yes, I feel. Oh, go ahead, Alexandra.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say this, like Sun square Jupiter feels like priming the engine. We're getting ready to grow our power and ready ourselves for some of these more expansive ideas and like earth shifting changes. And even though it's a square, I with Sun and Jupiter, I see like positivity here, like reinvigorating a lust for life, so that's what I'm reading from Sun square Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree with specifically you were talking about revving the engine. That's a kind of pressure too. It's like the pressure to go, let's go, here's some juice for you. So I'm with you, Whitney.
I could also see this as a moment of empowered speech. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we find ourselves capable of saying or articulating things that aren't necessarily easy, especially given the little sextile between Mercury and Mars, Mars and Cancer, right? Like difficult emotional truths able to be clearly articulated seems like a benefit of that moment. It could also be a moment where we're seeing more pointed things being said, publicly in the political discourse. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see like some of those shocking things that people have said.
Drama.
Yeah, exactly. That's
definitely looks more possible here. I mean, usually I would look to a Mercury cazimi, but the one that happens at the end of this month, the sun is in its fall, and then they're being hosted by Venus, and Venus is in Scorpio. Unhappy. It's like, no, this is definitely the time period right here where that stuff is going to happen.
If we go forward a few days, we have, I think I like Alexandra describes her transits that she likes as cute. And I think that's
it is cute.
what do you like about Venus trine Jupiter? let me connect it here.
It's Whitney's transit of the month. Take us away, girl.
Sure, I will. Okay. No, I think I said generative with the Sun square Jupiter, and I feel like this really brings in that generative power and some expansive ideas for us. Like, these are our grand ideas. And I mentioned earlier too how, this really helps inform our lunar eclipse in Pisces that comes next. And so I feel like there's something here with these like grand gestures, grand ideas that help galvanize transformation and like transcendence beyond certain limiting beliefs even. And honestly, it's cute. It's cute. Like Alexandra said, it just feels buoyant, and, I want to schedule a date on this day,
Yeah.
Oh, that's, I think, so sweet.
When Venus and Jupiter trine each other in air signs that were called, humane, you think about people becoming good resources for each other. It's like, I'm here to help you. You're here to help me. Mutually, like reciprocal, mutually beneficial relationships or exchange of ideas or information or services or connections of people that are being made. I love this for like networking. I also feel like Venus in Libra is very calculated because this is Saturn's exaltation. And there's an interesting form of mutual reception between Venus and Saturn in their, Venus is in Saturn's exaltation, Saturn is in Venus's exaltation.
Yes.
I feel like to be able to really consider the complexities and nuances of other people's realities and needs, and then to find ways, very Jupiter and Gemini, to do more than one thing to do a few things at once, where it's like that, two things can be true, and I can make those two things be true while making sure that people feel accommodated and safe or happy or harmonious.
Yeah, I think it is a nice counterpoint to the heavy questions of that Virgo Pisces axis, which are saying, how am I serving people? Who am I serving? Am I serving myself? What's going on? I think this moment is a reminder that we can get very zoomed into our own situation and agonizing about when ambiguity will be resolved, etc. Don't forget that you don't live in a vacuum. You have friends, you have people that you can talk to, that you can rely on. You can expand yourself to take in new ideas, kind of like you were talking about, Adam, actually expanding our idea of what's possible relating to a situation. This feels like a really good time for that. And with these transits, I always tell people the transits aren't necessarily things that just happen to you. You can take advantage of them. And so this might be a good day to ask yourself, who could I talk to about this? Is there someone who might have a fresh idea or fresh perspective, like you were saying, Whitney? Is there some way I can expand to transcend what feels really limiting right now? So you can kind of do that on purpose, even on this day.
Nice. That takes us right into our lunar eclipse on the 17th. This is our first eclipse in Pisces, right? We got the nodes changing signs somewhat imminently by the beginning of the new year. And we're going to see the first, this is an out of sign eclipse. North node is in Aries, but lunar eclipse in Pisces. So the other thing that's interesting about this lunar eclipse is that it's in the 3-degree engagement with Neptune, and the sun's moving into the opposition with Neptune, and that sun opposite Neptune happens within 3 days of the eclipse on the 20th. So I was mentioning this as my kind of takeaway of the month. So if it's okay with you guys, I might just start saying a few things about that.
Yeah,
go for it.
All right, good. So I first of all, I feel like the goodness of a moon in Virgo, right? Like a new moon in Virgo, and the concern with purity, which is like a hallmark of the sign of Virgo. It's like, is this good? Is it pure? Is it useful? How will it be judged? How will it be evaluated? That kind of anticipation of the harvest that comes at the fall equinox that Virgo is so hyper aware of, sometimes to its own detriment, right? But the counterpoint of Pisces is this sort of non-dual space where good and bad are, there's something that goes way beyond them, that goes way beyond good and bad.
It's the
And
multiverse.
yeah, exactly. It's everything everywhere all at once. It's like that. And so I look at this and I go, sometimes despite our best efforts to be good, we're going to fail, or we're not. Virgo is like, one of the lessons that Virgo is always learning, in my humble opinion, is that in order to be good, you also have to have experiences of having to forgive, right? Like, goodness without knowing the need for forgiveness is sort of just like, someone who passes a test but has no soul. It's like, so it's like, I think about that, and I think, what does the Pisces Neptune dimension of experience provide us with? It provides us with that thing that is so big and so vast that the only way of making room for it has to go beyond good and bad. It needs compassion, it needs mercy, it needs forgiveness, it needs grace, it needs mystery, it needs bliss. It needs things that go beyond our moral efforts on earth. And so I feel like this is a really interesting eclipse insofar as I think it's really going to bring up within us, you do your best. You just do your best. And remember that you're always okay and perfect exactly as you are. There's this bigger, huger perspective that's sort of coming in at the exact same time that there's a lot of effort in this cycle to do the right thing. Venus in Virgo with the South Node, or Venus in Libra with the South Node, which is an emphasis on like rightness and morality and justice and fairness. And the emphasis on Virgo, again, a lot of concern with purity and so forth. But I think there's some bigger perspective that we're being given that might allow for grace and forgiveness to come in and not be so hard or so strict, or it's okay if we're not getting everything right. We're learning.
Hear, hear. I know that.
Right.
Yeah. This one feels, I just think transcendent is such a good word for Pisces in general. But, like you're talking on this Pisces Virgo axis, there's a mingling of opposites here, right? It's like, okay, what are our dreams versus reality? Like, where are our pleasures versus our pain? And I think that we could absolutely be feeling some of that come through with this lunar eclipse.
Yeah. Adam, on your point of like purity and seeking what's good, I think the Piscean quest sometimes is a lack of concern for that.
Right. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I know Pisces people who it takes them 6 weeks to figure out that they didn't like a conversation they had,
Yeah, sure.
And
Totally.
I think there's some of that's a little bit of what Saturn's been asking of Pisces people during its tenure there. And that might be illuminated a little bit by this. I think this eclipse on a personal level, like natally, will really depend on your specific relationship with Saturn or people's planets that they have in Pisces. I just wanted to mention that because we had talked on previous episodes, just the difference between mundane and natal. If you're tracking in a mundane way, eclipses have a very specific meaning. But if you're tracking personally, you don't want to get sort of wrapped up in the catastrophic thinking there. If you have planets in Pisces, I think when I'm looking at this for natives, it's often the house of Pisces has activity, but way more often the planets that are being activated and the houses they rule have some activity. So if you have planets in Pisces, you're going to want to look at that. That was just a random note. But this spring, this degree of Pisces, here I am with my degrees, but is going to be the site of both a Venus and Mercury retrograde this coming spring. So Venus will go from early Aries back through late Pisces, and Mercury at the same time will also go from early Aries back through late Pisces. So this is also significant because this is the only Pisces eclipse that will have Saturn here. So this is like the start of this eclipse cycle in Pisces is going to feel significant, near, loud, relevant for this next few month period.
Yeah. I feel it's interesting to note what's being sandwiched in between the couple of days after the eclipse. You have the lunar eclipse, followed by Mercury opposite Saturn, followed closely by the sun trining Uranus here, and then the sun going right into an opposition with Neptune. So this, this is a few transits all happening a couple of days. I mean, you do have a little bit of space between each one, which is nice. But yeah, it speaks to me about things like, what should I care about and what should I let go of, right? Or what can I control and what's way beyond what I can control. And maybe also some breakthroughs that we have. Like, it's a really big deal to realize, hey, I didn't like that conversation and I need to tap in and ask myself, what am I feeling? And that's an interesting thing. I'll mention this as like an aside. So one time I was talking to my therapist and I was telling him like, well, I feel terrible if I have 2 cups of coffee. And I was like, this is so stupid. Like, I should be able to handle 2 cups of coffee. It's such a little thing, but I feel like a crazy person if I have a second cup of coffee and blah, blah, blah. And then I was talking about several other things that were and I kept calling them, they're little things. And he was like, well, who are they little to? You, or like what you think other people think of them, And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he was like, look, if a second cup of coffee throws you off, then it's a big deal to you, even if 1 cup of coffee you're calling a small thing, right?
Yeah.
So that, like, to me, that's kind of a Virgo Pisces dynamic insofar as we may be discovering more higher sensitivity to what makes us feel good or what makes us not feel so good, or we could talk about that as like boundaries, but I think it's also about like just tapping in and be like, how do I actually feel right now? Is this making me feel good? Is this person, is a situation, is this pattern or habit making me feel good? And if not, doesn't matter what other people think, if it's a big deal or if it's a small deal, it's just about what I feel.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a mutable sun Mercury, and I am not exaggerating when I say that if I go out to dinner, I take a picture of the menu, I go to the bathroom, and I go decide in private what I want to eat, because I'm very like anti-inflammatory with my eating. If I am sitting at a table with 10 other people, I don't even know what I will order. It will arrive to me and be a mystery because I'm so like just caught up in everything everybody else is doing. I have to go have a private moment and order my food in private. It's really bad.
Do you attribute that to, did you say your Gemini planets?
Yes, I have the Sun, Mercury, and Gemini in the 6th, and I do like anti-inflammatory clean eating, but there's so much cultural messaging that is different. And then when I'm seated at a table and people are the way people talk about food. And so I'm just, I'm going to go away and just check in with myself and do what honors my 6th house.
Yeah, that is so awesome. When did you, did you just like discover one day, like how did you come up with the idea to do that?
Oh gosh, around the Great Conjunction, I really started getting very, very clean, and I started working with a very talented holistic nutritionist. And I found that every time I was out, I was just making decisions that I would come home and be like, why did I make that decision?
Right.
And I just am very susceptible to other people, and it's a superpower. And sometimes it's a little flaw I have to accommodate for. So yeah, I just started doing that a few years ago. It really helps.
Nice. I love that. And it's funny because I'm not so like, I can do that, but I have Mars and Gemini, and when I'm in a busy place that's like bustling and noisy, I get
when
really
Adam's in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
We know what happens. Yeah.
You go crazy. Well, one thing I want to mention about this little T-square energy of like really my whole sign that we have, Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, here we are again, right? We these signs were very active in August. They're very active in September, and they continue to reflect just that general mutable, double-bodied reality of transitional spaces. We learn a lot in these spaces. We think new thoughts. We change perceptions. We work through old problems with different perspectives. We make our list of pros and cons. I feel like these spaces are they're liminal spaces where we can learn a lot and think through a lot of things. So I want to just kind of broadly qualify this area of the month as very, very beneficial for that kind of thing.
Oh, 100%. This Mercury squared Jupiter action on the 21st feels like we're seeing the bigger picture, and I can't also help but see that during all of this, I mean, we talked about the sun trining Uranus while the sun opposes Neptune. And then isn't it the next day here, on the 22nd, that the sun trines Pluto as well? And so all of a sudden we have all of our earthy houses activated in this trine. And it feels like we are starting to really move the earth around us, and how is reality shifting, and opposite Neptune, you're like, okay, wait, am I going the right way? But we're starting to see it. That's what's happening here. And I feel like this will be like a slow and steady progression of those movements.
Yeah, the outer planets are all in supportive aspect to one another too right now.
Yeah.
So there's 2 sextiles in the trine, which you talk about the ground moving. I mean, I see that in those outer planet aspects for sure, while Pluto is back at 29 Cap.
Yeah, there's a confluence of the outer planets that is really fascinating. And it does feel to me that final push of Pluto in Capricorn is, if it's on its deconstructive side, let's finally dismantle something that we've been in the process of deconstructing for a while.
Yeah.
Right. And let's take a big step maybe even a final step. And then on the other hand, it's, if you've, not so much on the deconstructive side, but on the constructive side, it's like, let's get the momentum to finish things, or to bring something fully into form that's been developing. So either finishing a process of deconstruction or completing a process of creation, but it comes into form. And also there's this almost like that feeling of having seen something through some larger vision that is reaching a point of blossoming or fruiting. I think, for example, of the fact that, with Neptune in the mix and these planets coming together, I'll be on the home stretch of the book that I'm writing. And so this kind of, for me as a writer anyway, and I'm sure all sorts of creative people can relate, you're getting close to completing a creative project, that the vision you started with gets really bright in your mind, and you're like, wow, this thing that started up here is now here,
It's real.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's a cool way of thinking about it, maybe.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go on to, we're skipping a little bit ahead here, but let's go to Venus square Pluto. I think that's a really interesting transit. It is Venus at the 29th anaretic degree of Libra, about to go into Scorpio.
Whoa!
And squaring Pluto in Capricorn. Last time that Venus will meet Pluto in Capricorn as well.
Yep. Yep. And the sun at that point will have entered Libra, and
just finishing a trine with Pluto too.
It trines with Pluto. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, whoa. It's kind of like karmic gas pedal is what that's giving me.
Yeah.
But also maybe overburden, karmic gas pedal, but oh my gosh, the car's too big, we're carrying too much. I don't know. I can't help but have just a little personal astro anxiety over this one with the recent Pluto or Venus Pluto dynamics.
Venus Pluto contact.
Yes, in my own chart. So I'm just, I'm going to choose to see the bright side here, and we'll talk about some passionate disruption, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm go ahead, Adam.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm kind of on the opposite end of that because I've had Pluto and Capricorn in my first house. And that's been asking me, like, can you dissolve? Can you get smaller? Can you dismantle yourself a little further? And so on its way out, I get a little Venus support on my midheaven. It's like, cute. Give me that. So I'm on the other
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
I can't wait to reflect when we come back for October's astrology and see how these landed for us.
And there will be another eclipse happening in Libra. Excuse me. Sorry, Adam. In October too.
That's right. Yeah. So I was going to say, we're going to be visiting, like there's going to be a solar eclipse coming up. And this to me is probably setting the table for that. Certain relationships are going to end. And then with a solar eclipse in Libra, new relationships will begin. Right. And I feel like that's a very simple interpretation because Venus Pluto will often be about the death or transformation of various relationships, working relationships or friendships or whatever. That doesn't mean that they have to end in a bad way. It's just expiration dates are sometimes reached in different relationships, and that's like natural. But then the solar eclipse coming on the heels in Libra to me would suggest that this ending is tied to wanting to go in a new direction. The other thing is, to me, is that Venus Pluto in Libra and Capricorn is sort of like, because Venus is in the superior position, and I don't always use that with outer planets, but I think it's interesting to do so in this case because Venus overwhelming or overcoming Pluto to me is like the picture of a velvet glove over an iron fist. There's a little bit of like a like I wouldn't be surprised to see like what are they, like something scandalous being dropped in a sort of politically savvy way around this time.
Or art. There's so many incredible artists and musicians who make really beautiful and a little subversive art with this Venus in Libra, touching that Pluto.
That's such a good point. And in fact, I would recommend you all, I'll tell you how to follow Alexandra at the end and Whitney. But Alexandra, I hope you'll be posting some of that art like you did last time, because that was super cool.
I have some geared up.
Yeah. I mean, so I think about this, and I think about it also as like Venus Pluto is a little bit like the crappiest image that comes to my mind is like the kind of conniving stuff that you see from people on reality shows where they're like all trying to win something, and they all look so nice, but they're also very sharky and like, a little bit of that energy maybe.
The Bachelor, like 20 women all fighting for one dude.
Or like whatever.
Is it really worth it?
Or you remember The Real World? Like it was in The Real World too, like all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I just feel like, Venus is very beautiful and poised and controlled in Libra, and I think is going to be doing some very wise, profound transforming. And then also I would watch for some of the seeking of power in like Venusian ways, which can kind of fly under the radar sometimes.
I think the flip side of that coin is a social cohesion overcoming a blatant power move or some kind of threat that is being overcome by a social banding together.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. That's great. Yeah. Nice. That's really cool. Yeah, that's hopeful too. I like that. Well, let's go to we have a couple of like quick little aspects. We have another Mercury Uranus aspect that will be taking place on the 24th, where Mercury in Virgo will trine Uranus in Taurus. Feels very productive, intuitive, and practically useful. Like I just feel like this is useful energy.
Oh yeah, I'm getting like practical magic, like let's play the game. And yeah, I like this one.
maybe like a touch deceptive. I don't typically think of Mercury and Virgo as like a deceptive type of Mercury, but it is
Mm-mm.
opposite Neptune. So I feel
Yeah.
like, could there be some practical magic is a great way of putting it, right? Because that contact with Neptune is a little, it is a little magical, and it is a little like, use your rational side, but use your magical intuitive side at the same time.
Well, right. And with that Neptune opposition, could it also be like very potent psychically for those of us who are just a little more attuned in that way, right? I mean, I think there's some definite possibility for that here.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to trine Pluto on the 25th. A couple days later, it's like yeah, if you're the
And
kind of
Pluto's trining Uranus too, so it's
right, yeah, this is connecting to all those outer planets that are
Yep.
interconnected, like Alexandra was pointing out a
Here's
minute
our
ago.
trine again.
Yeah, it's like, hey, in this little field, it might be that what is sometimes intangible about those outer planets is becoming like cognizable somehow.
the one thing that gets me about the end of this month is just the sun entering Libra as Venus exits. And so it just feels again through the summer, all these questions about how the one fits into the many. And I think we definitely are seeing that discourse play out culturally right now, just about how our personal preferences get eaten up by the machine of culture and social dynamics. But the sun in Libra is just not able to be the sun. It's trying to be harmonious. It's trying to keep the peace. And then we've got Venus in Scorpio, and it's like to me, this combo right here is like saying something just to get out of a situation and then filing that away for later to
Right.
actually kind of come back to.
Mhm.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. We're approaching at this point. We're now, the sun's entered Libra. Its host Venus is in a little bit of a difficult spot in Scorpio. I want to hear your analogy for Venus and Scorpio as opposed to Venus and Virgo, like you did for the ballet. So you got to come up with that. But yeah, I feel like Venus and
Yeah.
Scorpio, hosting the sun is probably creating some difficult diplomatic situations where it's hard to separate what the fair or balanced thing is from our deepest desires and the most complicated emotional entanglements we have. Mars is in Cancer, so I can say there's a lot of water starting to pour in. Right now, we're going to start getting
Mhm.
this kind of
Definitely.
grand water trine that's sort of building. And so, yeah, it's like the sun in Libra is going to have a hard time being really objective and rational and clear and balanced when it's being hosted by a Venus who's getting into these very watery and charged dynamics.
Oh yeah. I mean the sun in Libra is like just wants these like high standards, right? And Venus entering Scorpio, we're like too hungry to care, you know?
I love that. That's great. Yeah. We have Mars trine Saturn at the end. We'll just try to wrap things up here. Mars will
Yeah.
trine Saturn in Pisces. And to me, this is like at its worst, this is like leveraging an emotional situation in ways that are not so healthy or good. Like these two planets come together and you see something like two people who have similarly destructive needs helping each other
Yeah.
out. It's like
And it's bad. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't
No,
mean
go
to
ahead.
cut you off.
You're good.
Well, it's just like then Venus gets involved. Just, I think that technically happens in October, but there's basically a trine here. So it's like the two people with these bad intentions are conspiring together in the supportive aspect and both sort of like goading in a way the
Yeah.
Venusian.
Yeah, this is definitely complicated, and it's going to be, again, I think like Mercury is in Libra, and so this is a karmic moment for relationships that's starting to form, key relationships and questions about balance, and it's a very karmic moment that we're entering into with an eclipse in Libra with the South Node that tends to harvest and crystallize lessons that have had history behind them. So yeah, it's a pretty powerful end of the month with Mercury
And
Cazimi coming on the 30th.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's end it with that. What do you think about that one, guys?
I think the Mercury Cazimi happens at 8 Libra. The eclipse a few days later happens at 10 Libra.
Yep.
That's what I have to say so far.
All of them together. Well, like one thing that, well, Whitney, what do you think?
No, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say, because with Mars in a trine to Saturn, while Mercury then comes Cazimi, like this, I think we could read this like it could go both ways. We talked about some of the negative aspects, right? And how, I almost worry about like some sort of like domestic dispute, right? Is how that trine is feeling, from maybe a shadow side. But I could also see like hard work reaping rewards and fortune, right? Like I just went through the Mars square Saturn, obviously, in different signs, but that, that came out so positively for me. So, I ask, like, do we have the power to push beyond our boundaries? And then Mercury Cazimi could be like, yes, I know just how to do it. And that's where we go. But I'm really interested to hear more about how this feeds into the Libra eclipse, because I haven't quite gotten that far yet.
Yeah. Well,
I think go ahead, Adam.
No, you go ahead.
I'm so bad at the crosstalk today. Good God.
No,
Maybe I'm on a little lag.
You're fine.
Yeah, I think with the Libra eclipse, once the moon enters Libra, it actually does get a little better, I think. I mean, triple mutual reception is not a textbook thing, but it is kind of a living astrology thing. And so it will feel like the pieces do fit together in some way. That's always better than if they don't. And I don't think that Venus is, Venus in Scorpio, she can make stuff happen there, regardless of whether she's in her favorite place. So this just gives a sense to me of the support that we thought was there, or the harmony that we thought was harmonizing is not being made aware in some way of, some foundation that I was relying on to keep the peace in this situation or to give me balance, or some part of the foundation is actually holding a grudge or kind of stewing in some way, or has been hanging on to something for a long time that may now come back up to the surface.
Yeah. I look at we're going to talk about the eclipse next month, but the fact that Mercury Cazimi is coming at the very end of the month, and then it's followed under a dark moon, and then it's followed immediately by this solar eclipse, while the host is Venus in Scorpio, to me would say that some of the underlying motivations, or maybe the subtext within certain relationships, is there's karma around that's like being harvested right now. And so the way I think about it, for example, would be, one positive way of looking at this would be that the Mercury Cazimi in Libra gives you insight into underlying patterns in relationships. Venus in Scorpio, underlying desires or conflicts or edges. And there's just a clear, rational understanding of it. That doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but at least there's some airy space where you can see the pattern. And then I would imagine that this pattern is deep and complex and historical, because it's connected to Saturn in Pisces and Mars in Cancer. That it's not just a pattern in a relationship. It's, when you're in a relationship and you recognize a pattern and you realize that part of your partner's pattern comes from their dad or their mom or their background. And there's a mix of, this person needs to grow for our relationship to grow. And I also have to have compassion with how complex and historical that problem is, and that it can't be solved overnight. And so those are the kinds of things that come to my mind.
Yeah, it ties really, really neatly back into kind of some of those themes we identified for the month of service and what we do for others and how we give to others, and the ways that we need that to come back and identifying things that make us uncomfortable, hopefully in the moment that they happen and not 6 weeks later.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, any final thoughts that either of you would like to share before I tell people how they can get in touch with both of you and your work and your readings?
No, nothing left for me. Just thank you so much for having us back. I love this community.
Yeah. Super fun.
Agree.
If you would like to get in touch with Whitney, you can find her at astroarcana.com and on Instagram at astro.arcana.astrology. The website is where you can book a reading. Is that correct, Whitney?
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. So be sure to book a reading with either Whitney or Alexandra if you want someone to help guide you through some of the transits of the month. That is a great investment, and you're going to get some very specific guidance with respect to the house locations and the aspects and things like that. So I couldn't recommend it more highly. Alexandra is www.ninelivesastrology.com, and on Instagram is 9livesastrology. And with all of this fun stuff happening, I also highly recommend following them both on Instagram, because they also make content that will often comment on the aspects as they're happening as the month goes on. So good to stay in touch with them. If you enjoy this, that's where you can find their information. And don't forget that you can find transcripts of today's talk or any of our daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And on the website, you will also find our courses. Our first year course opens for enrollment on September 9th. So we'll be promoting that again soon. And we wish you all the best this month. If you have stories to share, use the hashtag grabbed in the comment section of this video and come back and tell us your story as the month goes on. Any of the aspects that hit, tell us your story and we'll feature them next month when we go over some of the stories from this September before we do October. You can also email them to us, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Just remember that anything you share, we will share here. So don't use your name or any names you don't want mentioned or whatever. Make sure it's okay to be shared publicly when you send it to us or comment. That is it for today. Thank you so much, Alexandra and Whitney, for being here. It is so much more fun for me to do this with you two than to be doing it all by myself. I love this. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Oh, right back at you. This is totally the highlight of my month.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Thanks, Whitney, and thanks, Adam.
All right. Take it easy, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Bye.